Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Theorycrafting Roundtable podcast. This is the first podcast since Genshin 3.0 update. So this will be our reaction to Sumeru, the Dendro reaction as a whole, and maybe if we have time, we'll talk about endgame content in Genshin. I'm Artesians, the host. I'm the head of Theorycrafting at Kaching Mains, and I do a lot of Theorycrafting work, but not so much these days because I'm a little busy with my masters. I'm joined here today by our standard hosts, Ayzel, who is a staff member at Kaching Mains, former heavy-duty theory crafter who used to crunch a lot of numbers for us. Not so much anymore since he's also in school. Say hi, Ayzel.
Hello.
I'm also joined by staple Zajef 77, theory crafter extraordinaire, Bennett salesman, and
it's more like Sucrose salesman now. People have bought the Bennett. I'm not gonna sell people something they already have. We're on to Sucrose now.
Okay, very nice.
What about Xinyan?
I'm sorry, but I'm not a snake oil salesman. I would.
Oh.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
And unfortunately, our other staple guest, Tenten, is not here today because he is late. He is on the way to TwitchCon San Diego and will not be able to make it on time, and maybe he'll squeeze in, but I highly doubt it. I'm also joined here today by a special guest, KB Fan, the head of Theorycrafting at Wangsheng Funeral Parlor. They're known for specializing in Theorycrafting unreleased content, and yeah,
that's a lot of what we do right now.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
So let's get this started, guys. So I was a little curious because Zajef, since the last time we've streamed, you've actually blown up like a crazy amount. Since...
when was the last podcast? Actually, how long ago was it?
It must have
been... The last
been...
one that you were in must have been like 2 months now.
Yeah, we had a quote unquote podcast on Dendro release, but we didn't post it because I thought that the quality was a little strange. So we'll have to reschedule that one with Kurt. But yeah. It's been crazy. Ever since the last time we've seen you, your channel's exploded, your Twitch is doing really well. So how's that been for you?
It's been nice. I've kind of just been doing the same thing, but new element means that a lot of new things to figure out. And when people want to figure something out, well, they gotta ask someone who knows what they're talking about, and I happen to know what I was talking about and be in the right place at the right time, so I ended up getting a lot of traffic to my channel.
I've noticed as like I've watched other content creators that like they bring up your name like a ton. So you've been helping out like the Genshin community as a whole, like content creator wise recently.
Yeah, I mean, I always try like when someone reaches out to me, like asking a question, especially if it's a content creator, like I always try my best to help them out, because at the end of the day, like I don't think anyone else can really do what I do, so I don't have any like feelings of I don't know how you describe it exactly, but I don't feel like I have to like be in competition with anyone, basically.
That's nice.
And so because what I attempt to do, like my quote-unquote mission statement with my content, is just not something that anyone else really does. And so that kind of lets me like just help people without having to worry that like without having that like voice in the back of my of my head that's like, well, if I help them, are they gonna like end up yoinking my viewers? But
I think that's a very nice position to be in. I think it's completely different for the like Discord theory crafting community scene, where new communities pop up every now and then, and it's been a slow grind. But I'm very happy for you, and Kaching Banes will definitely continue to support you and shout you out whenever we can, for sure.
True. Have you added a command for my elemental elemental reaction guide yet?
I have not, but if you send it somewhere, I will probably sort that out. We have a really powerful bot. Actually, Zajef, the Kaching bot is actually more powerful than you think.
Yeah.
Literally, you can download Kaching Banes' bot and export it throughout like thousands of servers now. So if we add a command to that version of Kaching bot, like a ton of Discord servers will get this command. So I think Kaching Banes is really crazy in terms of like being able to amplify your signal.
Yeah, because like right now, a lot of what I'm doing is like covering the units that are upcoming and the units that just got released, like talking about what's good and what's bad about them. And those are things that do really well. But like at the very beginning of the patch, I released like an elemental reaction guide, which like in comparison to those did like really poorly. But it's like a video I spent like probably in total hundreds of hours working on. And like looking at like how it performed just made me feel so sad.
I mean, I think this will weave into like our topic later, but I think the perennial debate over like the casual versus like the hardcore enjoyers, I think it's definitely more relevant than it is than it has been in recent months. But moving on from that, congratulations to Zajef again, but we gotta move on. Sumeru 3.0, huge patch, next region. How far has everyone gotten? How are you guys enjoying it compared to Inazuma?
So far, I think I've finished the first part of the Archon quest, like 3.0 content, I believe.
So Act 1.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil the story, so I don't know exactly where, but it will probably about like 6 hours or so inside the story quest.
So
so
you can
far.
type in the Discord. I'll tell you what part it was.
Okay.
Dude, I'm perfectly fine with saying where I am because I've just been so fucking busy. I think I'm still in... No, I'm in Act 2 now. Definitely in Act 2. So I am not too far, guys. I've only met... Yeah, I think. How about you, Ayzel?
I have not been to Sumeru yet.
This guy.
Did you at least go get your Dendro main character?
Okay, so no, I haven't.
Oh my god.
And the reason for that is my PC is actually broken and I can't play Genshin on my laptop. I just haven't really bothered to fix my computer because I've been just coping with my laptop for schoolwork. So yeah.
You let this guy in.
Why are you here? Yeah.
It's fine.
Ayzel, do you know what a Dendro is?
Is Dendro in the room with you now, Ayzel?
Yes, totally.
Okay. So wait, have you kept up with TC at all, Ayzel?
Yes, I have. I'm actually doing a lot of like TC stuff on some of the unreleased units, which can't talk about here, of course, but I've been like doing a decent bit of testing for one of them.
Yeah, so you and KB are actually on a separate podcast, right? That does specifically unreleased content, Theorycrafting.
Yeah,
right?
we do funny TC over there.
Any chance that Zajef will be making an appearance on there soon? I know he just released a video on, I believe, Nilo?
Yeah. Wait, I have like the most glorious screenshot from that. Wait.
Is it the 2222 podcast?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah, Zajef is free to join us on the second episode of the podcast. I won't be there because scheduling conflict with real life stuff, but yeah, it'll be episode 2 of our podcast.
Oh,
and we basically it's like the
ironic.
KQM podcast.
Except it's... 2.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the KQM podcast, but unreleased content.
Okay.
And it's a little bit shorter in duration.
That sounds like a bite-sized bit of information that a lot of people will be checking out. Do you have like a link or anything? Maybe we'll tap to like description. Just send it. Just send it to me, and I'll shout out.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you guys like it compared to Inazuma? Like, I know one of the things that people said on Twitter was how how bright Sumeru felt, how much more alive it felt. Yeah, how do you guys feel about it?
I did not like Inazuma at all. I had a lot of issues with like the way that everything just felt like it wasn't cohesive. The story felt really fragmented. The storytelling was just not something I was a very big fan of. And Sumeru was a really, really massive step up, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they have areas that are like spooky, or not like spooky, but like that aren't meant to be bright, and they don't feel bright, but they also don't feel boring, which is kind of what I felt in a lot of Inazuma.
Mm-hmm. I think for me personally, I didn't mind how dark Inazuma was. I thought it was very thematic. I think their storytelling in Inazuma was significantly worse. I think they've improved massively since then. I like specifically, I didn't like how nice like Act 1 and 2 was of Inazuma, and then we got a dating sim, and then immediately after that the story picked up again, and then it got disrupted again by this horrible Sangonomiya arc. I hated all of that. But in Sumeru, I like the ease into the story. I like how the characters are more woven into the story. And I like a lot of the callbacks to like the manga and stuff. That's really neat. I think a lot of people have been enjoying that type of lore and stuff like that. Ayzel? KB? Oh, Ayzel hasn't done much of
Well, yeah,
Sumeru.
I can't really speak on this really, so.
I think I like Sumeru a lot more than Inazuma. I did enjoy the scenery in Inazuma. I think the people who did the landscaping work did a great job, but the Sumeru story, I felt like less inclined to skip through things, like dialogue, and just like left click through everything. Whereas in Inazuma, I was kind of just skimming through it.
Mm-hmm. I think the interesting thing about Inazuma was like the weather part of it. I liked the perpetual rain, the perpetual thunder, like the fog. But then you finish the island and then it just all went away.
Yeah, it clears up.
Okay, so one last thing I'll say. Sumeru's animals are very cool. I like how more alive it feels. There's not like a million hilichurls everywhere, but there's just like things moving in Sumeru, so it feels better.
Yeah, they did a good job with that part of the game. And the traveling aspect of it, like the exploration, just felt a lot better with all the mechanics to go vertically. Like, I don't know what it's called, but the little hook
The
shot
Spider-Man.
thing you can use. Yeah. That makes a big difference for just exploration.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes, very cool exploration.
So, moving on from there, obviously not many people want to hear what we think about like the lore of a region, but I think more importantly than any of that is Dendro. Sino, the Dendro Traveler, Tignati, Kale, Dori, and the upcoming Nilo. Let's start off. How do we feel about Dendro?
I like the element. I think it's a good addition to the game. My feelings about the units that are currently out aren't as positive, I guess, but I think the framework for Dendro is pretty good.
I guess on my end, I haven't been able to play Dendro that much myself on my own account, but I've been playing on other people's accounts a decent bit, and I do enjoy Dendro quite a lot. It feels like it takes what we already have about the elemental reaction system, I guess, and it makes it more complex. Which I think as a theory crafter is something that I'm into, because it's like, well, yes, you used to have like hydro plus pyro equals vaporize, which is cool. You have like some random shit with Animo where it's like Animo plus Electro plus Hydro equals, well, if you have enough gauge, then you get this thing or you get that thing. And that was what always interested me about Genshin, is the like more complex reactions with that you could get with like Freeze, that you could get with Animo. And I think that a lot of Dendro reactions are similar to that. Some of them are like relatively more complex, some of them are relatively more simple. Like aggravate is not really that difficult. Just like a pure aggravate team is not really that complicated. But something that like is like hyper, bloom, quicken, aggravate, whatever, is a pretty complicated team. Things like Thundering Fury, Razor, whatever. And I'm really a big fan of that.
Uh-huh. So like, how do we feel about the reactions, right? Where do the compositions do you think they land right now? We have things like Sucre's Hyper Bloom. We have things like Thundering Fury, which is Razor on field, abusing the self-application of Electro. We've seen the priority rise for units like Fischl, Kaching, and Aggravate compositions, and obviously we have like whole new archetypes like yeah, just whole new archetypes of team composition. How do you think they've landed so far?
I think for the most part, a lot of them are pretty like okay. I do think that there's two that are kind of fallen behind so far. At least they need more development with either new characters or something to support, and that would be Bloom teams and Virgin teams. Mainly because like Hyper Bloom you can get away with using because it's easier to recommend Hyper Bloom for me because you only need one unit to stack a bunch of EM. Whereas in the Bloom teams, it's a little bit trickier because you either have to manage ownership or just stack EM on like all your characters, which is rather expensive to do for most people. And of course, Burgeon is a bit trickier to build around just because of the conditions it requires you to fulfill. And for Spread and Aggravate, I think those are relatively simple for a lot of people to get into. Like, for example, if someone was to play Kaching a lot, you can just throw in Dendro main character in, and suddenly you have an Aggravate team that works just fine.
I think with Spread specifically, it's also really interesting because with other elemental reactions, what we're used to, except for like, I guess, Freeze, is if you apply an element to a second element, like one of them gets drained. But with Spread and with Aggravate, the Quicken Aura does not get drained by applying Electro or by applying Dendro, which I think is a really interesting way of like shaking it up at least. And also like Quicken is its own aura that can also react with Hydro, and then you get like some really weird mechanics and some really interesting teams with that. So yeah, I think that Quicken is, if you play purely Spread, purely Aggravate, pretty simple to understand. But if you want to add in other elements to turn it into more than just a pure Aggravate / pure Spread team, that becomes pretty interesting.
Zajef, any opinions how you think Dendro has landed in terms of? I mean, we've had compositions like standard Taser, national, standard hyper carry things. Like how do you think it's changed the metagame?
I'm just really happy that we get more new different archetypes, because most of the archetypes became popular before my voice was like big in the community.
Mm-hmm.
With these archetypes, I get to name them if I want to.
You get to name them Thundering Fury. Yes. And Curry Toma.
It's okay, Zajef. I mean, you find out, all of us here probably had our hand in discovering something in TC. You get to have Thundering Fury, okay? It's all right.
But yeah, like I think Virgin is a lot more situational. It's like when it works, it's pretty good, but it's not like crazy. I think Hyper Bloom is kind of nuts. I think like Quicken, Aggravate, Spread, it's good, but it's not like it's kind of just the same thing. Like, purely Quicken teams, it's just your units are doing numbers, and your numbers can be turned into bigger numbers if you have the right button. It's also very good, but it's very like unit reliant on making sure you have the right good units. I feel like Hyper Bloom has so much more flexibility because it's less tied to talent damage and more to elemental application. And so I've been playing a lot of a full EM Raiden with no burst, and I've been enjoying it a lot. I think it's actually a really good team, and I think the fact that it's really good is really funny.
I think I'm also a big fan of full EM Raiden. So, really quick, I think when 3.0 was coming out, we had a short discussion that we might be concerned that Dendro could force you to invest into like more characters. That the bonuses from Dendro, the damage might not be enough to warrant starting to invest a lot of elemental mastery on characters, because it's a more rare main stat and it's a new artifact set that we have to grind for. Do you think that these concerns are still around, or do you think like other pressing things like how Cryo and Geo are mostly ignored by Dendro?
I honestly don't think that's a problem. Like, I understand why people want there to be a reaction between all the things, but I honestly don't think that would necessarily be good.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that interactions are good, and reactions are good, and it means that elements have interactions with each other. But because it's not just two elements in the game, elements not having interactions or direct reactions with each other can mean that if you have a third element that comes into play, that third element creates an interaction that wouldn't be able to exist if the two elements had a direct reaction with each other. I also think that thematically, the frost element not doing something with the plant element is kind of it kind of makes sense, I guess. If they were gonna have one element not react, I think Cryo is probably the right one.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of same for Geo, because pretty hard to grow plants on rocks. It happens, but
I don't know. I think when you put a plant and electricity together, I don't know if your plant grows faster or your electricity grows in any power at all. So I think they could come up with something, but I get what you mean.
They definitely could. They definitely could. And if they did, I wouldn't necessarily be against it. But I just think that a lot of people are saying that why aren't they putting an interaction? Well, I don't think they need to. I think that the lack of interaction can be an interaction in itself as well. It opens the path for different things.
Sure. I mean, we've definitely seen it with the interactions with Freeze and Dendro, so I'm sure something in the future will come by for Geo. All right. Do you guys have any quick final thoughts on how we feel about Dendro, how it's landed?
Thundering Furry is the worst and best team name ever.
What? It's a good name.
KB, how's it? How do you feel about it? I mean, it could be anything. It could be from how we feel about hard it is to theorycraft, or how annoying it is. What's up?
I like it because I think TC was getting a little stale in the few months before Dendro dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like that we have new toys to play with to work on team.
Yeah.
And to revisit characters that were previously not as good. A lot of characters got uplifted, so the lower floor has been raised a bit for some of those characters that just haven't got enough love in the game, which is really neat.
There is one huge criticism of Dendro that I have, actually.
Lay it on us.
Where's the tutorial? I don't mind it, right? Personally, it doesn't affect me. I'm literally the guy who figures it out, and the fact that there's no tutorial means that there's probably more people that wonder what the fuck is going on and that look at my videos. But still, where's the tutorial? What? You're gonna introduce a whole new aspect, by far more complicated than the other elements you had before, to your combat system, and you're just not gonna give us a proper tutorial?
Yeah, I feel like they could have done a better job, at least in some kind of YouTube video, on on like their Twitter or on their YouTube channel, or like an in-game tutorial, anything that at least would have explained like how elemental mastery and how levels are important for these reactions.
There is a tutorial actually. So,
yeah.
you know the one-time domains?
Yes. The domain of, like, it's like the wolf or something like that, or the eagle or something like that.
What?
The one in Liwei, or sorry, not Liwei, Mondstadt is like
In
that, I think,
Mondstadt,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, the one of the 4
maybe.
wins or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But they gave us one-time domains, and in those one-time domains, you will have buffs such as. Wait, let me teleport to it and read the buff verbatim. I don't have a great computer. It's going to take a while. Okay. So the one in Montemia Forest has a buff that goes as such. When a character triggers Quicken on an opponent, that opponent's all elemental resistance and physical resistance are decreased by 50% for 8 seconds.
That's
now,
great.
I am fairly certain that most of you watching, and honestly probably all of you in the call right now, didn't know that that domain had that.
I have not touched any of these domains.
Because it doesn't tell you unless you click on like the little I domain details thing, which nobody's ever done, until you're already inside the domain. And if you're already inside the domain, you're not going to quit the domain just to change your team. This is the closest thing to a tutorial we have right now. And no, pressing G for the game to tell you what the name of the reaction is not a tutorial. It doesn't tell you how to use it.
It really is amazing. It's a real head scratcher about how Hoyoverse doesn't really put too much emphasis on combat in the game, even though they have like fairly sophisticated like things going on in the background that define it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, also, like, even if the combat isn't difficult for a lot of the things, you still have to interact with the combat system with a lot of events that they do anyways.
I wonder,
I don't
like,
know.
what percentage of players just kind of run around with like a Dendro character like Kale and like Bennett and really like burning, but like have no idea what's going on, like who to level up, who to put elemental mastery on, or even like how to start abusing things like Hyper Bloom and things like that. I really do wonder, like, what percentage of players don't know that the damage from Hyper Bloom scales with the person who's bursting your core, like their level and their elemental mastery. I really wonder.
Probably most.
I think it's a lot. Yeah.
Really?
Like, just using like the example of all the people I know in person, a lot of them just don't know what's going on, and that's how they play. You know, they're just enjoying the game and just doing whatever, and they just know me as that guy who like focuses in that game. But
dude, based
you know,
on what I've been
them,
reading on
not a big
Reddit
deal.
and Twitter, I think like
oh, no.
at least like 70% of Genshin players have no idea. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
yeah. The biggest pitfall to avoid falling into is that a lot of people will hear most players don't care about the combat system, and will conclude, okay, well, I guess Hoyoverse shouldn't cater to combat players. The thing is, there are not really aspects of a game that the majority of the player will care about. There's too many different aspects in games for it to be like, oh yeah, well, the majority of the players care about aspect 1, and then the rest care about either aspect 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? There's too many different things you can care about for there to be like one massive group of people that care about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, the combat system, it really is complex. I don't, like, once you understand like the underlying rules and stuff, I guess like for people like us who've been working with this stuff for like a year and a half, at least 2 years for some of us, like it's not too hard to piece together. But I can't imagine what it's like to be a player who, you know, who opens up Genshin like once a month, plays a story beat or two, and then like logs off.
Mhm.
Yeah, I imagine that there has to be like 40% of players that think that building elemental mastery on their Dendro character is what increases like hyper bloom, if they even know how to proc hyper bloom.
Oh, most definitely. Like it's actually a small group of the people I know in person that actually do Abyss and like follow like how the game systems work. And even when
Mhm.
they do, they don't follow it that closely. It's just that's a trend I've noticed at least.
Mhm.
Of course, in the theory crafting circle, like in Discord and these communities, people are generally much more aware of what's going on, but I would say that's still not like representative of like a normal person playing Genshin.
I think we're on the precipice of dipping our fingers into the next topic, but
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to wrap this one up real quick. I think that Dendro has been extremely positive for the game. I think that it's opened the door for many units that many people would have considered useless otherwise. Units like Kaching and Lisa like turn around almost instantly. Fischl rises up in
Cookie.
priority. Kuki is amazing. Toma is
Yeah,
amazing. Like,
Toma.
yeah, I think those are like great examples of like how you can raise a floor in a game without like implicit power creep, right? Sure, you can make an argument that okay, EM Raiden, Resident Sleeper, another build where Raiden is jacked out of her mind, but I mean, who cares, right? Like if like now if people want to play Kuki, they can actually play her in a pretty decent team that isn't like griefing like their clears or how they want to play the game or anything like that. So I think we'll skip the artifacts because I don't think there's too much to talk about. They're pretty stock standard. Gilded Dreams and Deepwood Memories.
Mhm.
So we're 50 minutes we're like 40 minutes in the podcast now, and we have the GameSpot interview. For many of you that are listening, I'm sure some of you have heard about this. There's been a huge uproar here and overseas on Reddit, on Twitter, on the YouTube, like Genshin, like the Genshin community in general, content creators, just casual listeners have heard about this interview. And to sum it up, GameSpot emailed Hoyo versus developers, whatever that means, and asked about endgame. The question was, the Spiral Abyss is the only true endgame for players at high adventure ranks. They asked if there were any plans to release new, permanent endgame content, such as the Spiral Abyss. And the answer that they gave was no. That they believe that a permanent endgame, similar to the Spiral Abyss, creates anxiety for players who are not interested in what I would probably consider endgame content, and that their philosophy going forward would be introducing things like their trading card game that would increase like the diversity of gameplay in Genshin. They think that Genshin is like a platform that has compatibility with like lots of different types of gameplay, that they're going to stick to like this mini game philosophy that they really like. And so far we've had like Fall Guys, we've had roguelikes, we've had genuine boss rushes. So yeah, it's true. Their events have been super wide, and generally speaking, their difficult combat events have not been popular. And we're bringing it up today because there's been a lot of fervor over this. We have people talking about how there could be a slippery slope for endgame content, how people believe that developing endgame content or another Spiral Abyss is bad for the game. And so yeah, I'm gonna quickly just open the floor after the summary. How do we feel about endgame in Genshin? Do we think that combat is like a real necessity to the game? Are mini games like the roguelike and Inazuma or a permanent trading card game enough? What do you guys think?
So I think combat's by far is my favorite kind of content in Genshin, and I think a lot of people here can relate with that. I think a lot of the T series really enjoy Genshin for combat. I mean, some may enjoy it for story or the mini games also, but I would say combat is a big draw for these kinds of people, and it is quite unfortunate that Hoyo doesn't want to expand upon that system more to cater to that kind of audience.
I think that on my end, I would also agree combat is an important part of like my Genshin experience. I think that I do kind of understand what the anxiety thing they're trying to say is. Because I was reading a bit and I think like one of the concerns that I saw was, well, if the game is too focused on combat, then that's going to make me feel really bad when like my character, like let's say I main like Xinyan, and Xinyan is not as good as Bennett, and that's going to make me feel really bad if the entire game is focused on combat and I'm a Xinyan main and all I hear is I can't use my character here. I can't do this, I can't do that because my character is simply unviable in combat. Which I guess kind of makes sense. I'm not really a big fan of it because it's like, well, you can just play Xinyan in Overworld and just like once every 2 weeks, just swap someone else for this. But I don't know. I can kind of understand where I think that the way that they framed it as it being like anxiety is not exactly the right way to frame it. I think it's more of creating combat focus can make players who don't really care about optimization slash combat as much feel excluded because regardless of whether or not content is optional, it always feels bad to see someone else doing like content doing well at it and you just try it and then you just can't do it. So I kind of can understand it. Just like kind of playing devil's advocate, but yeah, I don't know. I still think combat is probably like the endgame content that they should focus on and that they should make more endgame content that's combat focused.
Zajef, did you want to go first, or did you want to let me go?
Yeah, I'll go. I think it's. I mean, there's a reason why the anxiety thing has basically become a meme now. It's bullshit. Like, I know it. You know it. If you're watching this, you probably know it too. Like, don't get me wrong. There can be difficulty in games can cause anxiety, but this like idea that they wouldn't do something, they wouldn't add something to the game because it causes anxiety is like the most laughable thing to hear from a gacha game developer. It's just wildly bullshit. It's they don't want to add it, and they're just using the first excuse that comes to mind that they think people are going to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For
me,
me,
I think it's like a money oriented thing. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, finish. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that the main reason why they don't want to include combat is because I don't think they ever planned for Genshin to be their one game. I think their focus is to create a like successful studio that has multiple popular titles. And I think that they're like intentionally not adding things to Genshin to try to push people towards their other titles that have those things.
That is an interesting take. I believe that Hoyo versus like mission statement is by 2030 they want like a huge living world, something like that. I think they mentioned something about like VR world or something like that by 2030.
They're creating the metaverse.
going back to like endgame and stuff, I think that the game pushes you to like level up your characters and like daily restricts your artifacts. Like the only real form of progression besides completing the story is leveling up your characters, and there's no place to really test your characters to the limit there. I think that they've built a great platform for complex combat, but they just don't want to use it. I've heard an interesting take that someone, I think it might have been Ziox, that he believes that players who engage with the combat system are probably the most dedicated or like the most willing to spend money because they would because they want to keep climbing in terms of like meta power. But I think I disagree. I think I agree with Ayzel where it does come down to money. I think internally they definitely have the metrics to understand that maybe it is the casual players, the people that who log in every now and then who play like a mini game or two. Players who don't play constantly to farm primo gems end up just spending more money to pull for units that they're interested in. And we know this changes like between each region for sure. We know that in China that the Genshin community is much more bought into the idea that like you should buy constellations, you should buy refinements for weapons. While in Japan, like regions like Japan, players there literally don't care about meta like at all. Interestingly enough, they literally only pool on characters that they like. And you know, it's interesting. I think it's a shame for sure.
Right. I mean, you can just see that with Japan in their Yoimiya banner sales, and they had Rin Tosaka's voice actress for that, and then Yoimiya sales were just through the roof because everyone's like, "Oh, it's Rin's voice actress, we must buy her." And yeah, I think it's like if you focus too much on combat, like I'm just speaking from the perspective of a fake Grand Order player, where we have something like 300 units out now, and any new unit release isn't really going to be able to add much to your combat power if you already have like a decent portion of the previous units. If you have, for example, like let's say Ozymandias, you probably don't need another Buster Rider Servant. Probably doesn't mean anything to anyone who doesn't play Fate, but it's like they do basically the same thing, right? So why would you need this other servant? Why do you need this other unit when you already have one? The only reason to incentivize someone outside of combat power is like how much you sim for them, how much you like just like that character. And I think Hoyo is trying to create longevity for the game because they foresee themselves having a lot of units in the game, and they don't want to be stuck in a position where they can't sell a unit based on their kit because the kit they're just already saturated with kit, and they have to like make this unit do something different. And maybe they're just at a point where they can't, so they're like, okay, well, in that case, we don't ever want to be stuck in that corner where we're just trying to rely on combat power to sell units. We should instead focus on like mini games where we can have little stories for our characters. Things that aren't combat focused, so that combat focus isn't a reason to pull for characters.
I think there's like one big issue that I've had with like the whole conversation surrounding this for a long time, and it's this like I feel like there's a middle ground that people don't really talk about. It's not even real a middle ground. It's just the biggest issue that people have with the current state of the combat system isn't it's too easy or it's too difficult. Like some people have those issues, but the biggest issue that I've seen, the biggest issue that I have, is it's one thing every 2 weeks. Like if it was the same difficulty, for example, right? Like we've had a lot of different abysses, right? If they just made it so that the abyss changed every day, but only one clear every 2 weeks, gave you the rewards for it, that would already be a massive like improvement for me. Because like just reusing the old abysses, just something. It feels so frustrating just only having the one thing to do over and over. Like the thing that I like about Genshin is the combat, and the only combat that I can do that doesn't just end in like before. The only combat that I can do where the result isn't just, well, I've used all my bursts, the enemy died after the second one, now what? The only combat that I can do like that is Abyss. But Abyss is so stale and so repetitive and so boring. And I just wish it wasn't. It doesn't need to be a fucking like new massive raid system, co-op 8-player raids, just anything. A fucking breadcrumb.
So a lot of the discussion has also focused around why people play the game and how Genshin right now, as it is a really strong casual game. That introducing more competitive elements could introduce like competitiveness within the community and then urge players to want to clear something else. For players that don't have that much time or don't really care about the combat system, they genuinely dread things like difficult combat events. What would we respond? Like, what do we think would be the answer to that? Like, what kind of endgame are we talking about? Do we mean like, okay, we mean Inazuma level abysses, or do we mean something more easy, maybe more interesting, like the Hyakunin Iki?
Honestly, I think the game would do better or it would be much better to play as a combat player if there were just, instead of those quick 3-minute clears for Abyss that you have to compress your clear to be very quick. It would be nice to have long form content, like longer battles. Because as I'm pretty sure most people here are, they can clear Abyss very fast, and then your content's over, and then you have to enter a loading screen to start it over again, and you don't really get to play the game that much in that regard. I really wish there was like longer fights, at least just to test things out, and maybe even ways to measure like how you're doing, like through metrics, like is your damage getting better as you invest into your characters, like, and how much. I really wish Genshin had more tools like that. It'd be really nice. Um, but those things I wouldn't imagine would influence the casual players because they wouldn't be interacting with those systems. And I'm assuming Hoya wouldn't lock Primo Gem rewards across like extremely difficult content because historically, the easiest clear generally gives you the Primo Gem rewards, and then the rest of the stuff is just like material upgrades, which only like hardcore players would care about getting, like, a little bit of more each day to level up their characters because they want to keep investing to this combat system that they enjoy.
I think if they I think there is some sort of solution. I think there is some version of the Abyss that doesn't induce as much anxiety. I think I imagine a lot of the complaints about the Abyss are the timer. That you need to beat a 3-minute timer or 1.5-minute timer on each side, and that is what causes like a ton of anxiety. I think it would be interesting if they could try like a combat event where you have the opposite, where you have a fixed number of enemies in certain waves, and you have to clear it as fast as possible. Not like as a counter ticking down, but a timer ticking up. And there's no incentive, like no huge incentive to like clear fast, like with extra rewards or anything, but players would just naturally compete with timers, right? But in general, I think that introducing competitive elements into a game is probably what keeps it interesting. I imagine that there might be Genshin might have a problem with where there's actually too many casual players that for typical games where content creators drive a lot of interest for a game by being competitive or by doing like amazing things, Genshin is a lot more accessible in the sense that like anybody can almost do anything in terms of like just beating the story and exploring the world. Okay.
Well, I will say in the end game for Genshin, I do appreciate sometimes that I don't actually have to put too much time daily to basically min-max my progression to a reasonable degree. Of course, you can clear the map, which gives you like a little bit more progression, but it's not advisable, right? But
honestly, I just wish that things like clearing the map that you can already do, it's not fun because the enemies are too squishy to. They're
yeah.
too far away from each other for it to feel like a continuous combat experience. It just feels like you're running and then you use a burst and then you run.
And
make
also the
a
reward
combat
drop.
system with literally the same drops, where either the enemies just keep spawning or they're tankier, and like it's good and it's already something. There's just so many easy ways to address combat players' concerns, and they just don't. And like, I get that they don't because, again, right? Like, I think that they don't because they want combat-focused players to try their other titles, and like, I get that it's a business decision. What really frustrates me is when someone who isn't Hoyoverse says, "Oh no, I hope they don't add it for you. I don't want you to be happy.
I was
don't,
gonna bring this
you
up,
don't
yeah.
deserve. You do not deserve to have content you enjoy." And they don't say it like that, obviously. I mean, some actually do.
So yeah, there's to clean this up a little bit. There has been talks and like high upvoted comments on Reddit, like really high engagement tweets, stating things that downplay the concerns of combat events. That they say that the claim is that because so many people enjoy the story, or that they enjoy the story more, or they enjoy like the teapot more, there shouldn't be content. They shouldn't spend dev time on content that isn't for everyone.
Well, that's a bit of a misstep with how development works, because you can paralyze a lot of these things. The same people that are working on story are not going to be the people that get taken away to do combat-related things.
Yeah.
Like very easily, they could hire a team that's just the Abyss team that picks good configurations that rotate like every day or every 3 days to give a little bit more spice for people who just want to come back and just kill a bunch of things and just sign off, right? I would really like there to be alternative ways to complete your daily progression. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like you have to do teapot to progress. It would be fine. I would be fine if like there was an Abyss or a combat oriented way to get teapot like rewards too. And one way they can reduce the amount of time you need to spend a day is if you complete one version of the progression track, it means you don't have to do the other kind of content. Even you can do both still, but it won't give you like duplicate rewards, and that would lessen the burden of having to do dailies. Because from how I see the way they framed the answer, it seemed like they were trying to say like, oh, we don't want to be something like a game like Lost Ark. For anyone who's familiar with Lost Ark, that's a game that you basically have dailies, but you can make multiple characters, and the amount of time it takes to do dailies ends up being 10 hours if you want to min-max your progression. So
Actually,
it's crazy.
There is one thing in Lost Ark that I think they do so incredibly well as like an optional thing that gives such minor returns but still feels worth doing if you like only play one account. Because when I played Lost Ark, I only played one account, really.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to the point where it felt like I couldn't really progress without making a new account, that's when I quit. But one thing that I thought was really, really nice was how they treated is it the Chaos dungeons? The daily like mob spawn thing.
Yeah, the daily Chaos dungeons.
Yeah. The way that like, in order to get your rewards for the day, you do it like what was it? Twice
a day. Yes.
Yeah, twice a day. But then you can decide to continue doing it, and instead of the normal rewards, it gives you like incredibly minor things that you can turn in for a very, very, very small reward. And so you can decide to just do the normal stuff, or you can end up getting like 5% more per week and like quintuple your game time. But it was like the small incentive that I needed to have the desire to do those things and to actually get to keep playing the game.
If the Abyss gave you like 1,000 more every time you beat a floor, how much more do you think you'd have?
I mean, every time you beat a floor, every time you beat 12-3.
I think like a floor or something. I don't know, like some relatively minor amount of more, I think.
I mean, where is it? There's the Abyss achievements, right? I have 751 clears of 12-3. But most of my Abyss time is spent doing like testing, which means that most of the time I end up pressing the retry button before I'm done. That's only the amount of times that I did it all the way through. Most likely, I've probably done 3 to 4,000 like runs, which is probably like about 6,000 ish, probably clears of like a single
Yeah.
floor. Yeah, that'd be a nice little 6 million more.
I think we could talk all day about how Genshin could add more reward systems for this, but I think an interesting question I ask for all of us is, how do we feel about the relationship between theory crafting and a game that has no endgame future? How worthwhile is our purpose to teach people how to optimize their gameplay for a game that admittedly doesn't want it?
I've always had a more like beginner / free to play focus with my TC. It's always been about
Mm-hmm.
how fast can you get a new account to 36-star Abyss, and not how fast can you clear this chamber if you play for 2 years.
I think that type of content gives me anxiety, Zajef. If I can't make a new account and clear in 36 stars at the same time, I don't want to play the game anymore. But in reality, legitimately, how I know theory crafting like can be very niche already, but in a game with no endgame feature, how do you think that more people would be less inclined to learn anything about it?
I don't think it changes much. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
if anything, the dev interview is probably like the straw that broke the camel's back for a few of the more combat focused players that just were still coping that Hoyoverse would ever do something for them, and they just decide, well, okay, well, I was like hoping that maybe perhaps they do something, but now they said they wouldn't, so I guess I'm just out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like how my approach to theory crafting changes, it doesn't. And in terms of how people who aren't currently very much into the combat system, how likely they are to end up wanting a guide for something, I don't think any of that really changes.
Uh-huh. What about you,
I also
KB
agree.
or Ayzel? Yeah, because we're representatives of like, I don't know, the administrative side of like theory crafting content. We're people who push papers and push not narratives, but like maybe tone in some of our guides and content. How do you guys feel about this?
I don't
I
think it
think
really matters.
TC
Maybe you go first,
overall focuses a lot on how to bring a new player up so they can play the game comfortably and get where they want to be. And I think that's a good thing. But also, I mean, there's people who do TC for various reasons. Sometimes it's just they want to just figure out how to make the fastest clearing team. And I know some people aren't as interested in that stuff, but for example, I am someone who likes seeing ceilings being pushed because it's just fun to just mess around in the game system. Even if the game isn't hard, that doesn't stop people from wanting to min-max things or try to solve complicated problems, right? You can see that in, like, for example, the people who speedrun games that are relatively easy to do. They squeeze out everything they can because it's fun to search for more improvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this announcement from Hoyo, I don't think it would affect anyone on my staff, for example. I don't think they're gonna just be like, there's no endgame content. I guess I'll stop doing TC. I think they're all in for TC for less reasons about, like, support of the game, but rather they just find it interesting to do, and they enjoy helping people problem solve, like, characters. Specifically in my field, since we're working with pre-release stuff, a lot of it is involving like prepping players' first experience with the characters, right? Because when a character comes out, we want to try to prepare people to basically be ready to play the character in a way that supports their idea of like doing well or their play style.
Mm-hmm.
I think like on my end, I think I have like a third viewpoint of why I like to do TC. And because Zajef like does TC with focus on free to play / new players, you do love TC with focus on speed running, pushing limits, whatever. I think on my end, I don't actually really TC for the game itself. I think I just do theory crafting because I think theory crafting is interesting. Um, and I like to do theory crafting for units that I like, not because I necessarily want to play those units in game, but more just because I think I like those units and I would like to, I guess, expand the like breadth of knowledge that there is available about that character.
So why don't you like Thundering Fury then?
I like Thundering Fury. I just think it's a weird name.
Good name.
It is a good name, but it's also a bad name at the same time.
No,
But yeah, like I mean, the two characters that I've done the most work on, like in my history at KQM, are Kazuha and Yoimiya. Yoimiya, I did a lot of TC on because I like Yoimiya. That's basically it. And Kazuha, I did a lot of TC on because, yeah, he's a good character and all, but I think one of the main reasons that I liked Kazuha so much is there are a lot of ideas that you can create surrounding him based on how he absorbs his burst, based on in what order he casts his elemental skill, based on simultaneous reaction priority. There's so many different aspects to Kazuha as a character that make him really interesting to come up with ideas for and to just like, I guess, think about. And that's not just because he's a good character, because I also really like Razor, and Razor is arguably before Thundering Fury became a thing. Razor was not that great of a character. But what Razor did have was he had a really unique electro self-infusion mechanic that allowed him to do self-overloads and allowed you to play him as this really weird EM Razor. You could also play like double Animo Dragon Strike Razor, or you could play Shatter Razor, or you could play like some really whack cops that are not good, but are really interesting to think about, to explore, to say like, this cop isn't good, and I know that this cop isn't good, but how can I come up with like some way to make this cop at least playable? Or how can I optimize a really shitty team comp? And I think that's like why I ever did theory crafting, which is like a selfish reason, right? Like I mostly just theory crafted because I personally found it interesting. But I don't think that that's going to go away. And I think that for a lot of people, they also do theory crafting or they do combat for that reason. They're not like trying to theory crafting isn't going to die because some Genshin dev said we're not adding endgame content, so there isn't technically a point of theory crafting, because I think so many theory crafters don't just do theory crafting because they want to help other people clear abyss. I think a lot of people just do theory crafting because they're like, I like doing theory crafting, I like crunching numbers, I like going through sheets, I like interacting with people, interacting in like this marketplace of ideas or whatever, where we could like have discussions about team strength. Regardless of whether or not like team strength actually matters, we can still talk about it, and that's interesting.
Cool. And then I think for me to wrap up this topic, I think what KB, Zajef, and Ayzel said is all correct. I think people still have this strange misconception that theory crafting is only for one-shotting shit. It's only for pushing you to the end. I think for a very long time, for over like a year and a half, that we've known you don't need that much work, don't need that much like investment to really clear anything that you want. And being able to see like the general community learn how to use reactions, like how slowly the conversations have gone from, yeah, I don't know how anything works, to other people explaining like ICD to people, I think it's been very, very cool to see, and to be able to feel like a little bit responsible for it is really nice. I think going forward, TC is going to be the same. I think people will learn how to optimize their favorite characters to the best of their ability. Whether or not there's a place to use it or not, I don't think people really care too much. It's a little bit sad, but I mean, yeah, I think TC's been relatively healthy about it. Does anyone else have any closing thoughts on this one?
Ooh,
Yeah, the
Go ahead.
main thing that TC has that's really nice is this is a game that will continuously get new characters, and I think that really does keep the game alive in the TC sense, right? It's not like a game like Smash Melee where it never gets a patch ever again, and once you figure out how the game is, although it took a while, even in Smash, right? It's a game that gets a lot of new life every couple months. I think everyone can agree that the game state has changed a lot since Leeway, right? We have a lot of different tools and toys to work with, and I think
No, it's
MiHoYo
exactly
will
the same.
continue.
National's the best. Venti,
No.
Morgana.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, MiHoYo will keep giving us new characters and toys to play with, and I think that's what keeps TCers happy. Not the fact that we have to problem solve to just clear the abyss only. I don't think that's always it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it for me.
My closing thoughts is I've accepted we're not gonna get stuff from Hoyo, so I've just been like brainstorming ways to just fucking do it like for myself basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna start like actually tryharding the combat events and like co-oping them, figuring out co-op TC. I've been having a lot of fun like trying to figure out what's good in co-op recently.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm gonna be the #1 co-op theory crafter. Just you wait.
Okay. I think this wraps up this topic, unless we had any other questions we wanted to do. There have been interesting takes all around from like everywhere. But I don't know. Oh, one last thing, just as a catch-all, so that we don't get railed for this later by other people. What do you guys think about the complaint about anxiety? I know it's been joked around a lot that like the anxiety is hypocritical, that people will see other people doing more damage and will end up pulling weapons or constellations even though they don't need to. But is there merit to the idea that having difficult combat events or difficult events in general does induce some sort of anxiety in people, that some people really are adverse to like more challenging content in a game that they just enjoy for like 15 minutes a day?
So I have a funny position here. The thing that actually gives me the most amount of closest thing you could call the anxiety in this game is limited time events, because sometimes I might be busy with something, but I know that I have to complete X amount of events to get something that will go away, which is like the FOMO thing. More so that I get that anxiety from that more so than clearing the abyss. But obviously it's probably because I don't have any trouble clearing the abyss anymore. So like I don't think MiHoYo is afraid of anxiety systems. I mean, the fact that Albedo's sword, for example, is a limited event only weapon that will probably never come back, and it's his best in slot, and you just had to play the event. And what if you were busy in real life? You couldn't grab it, basically. And that kind of sucks for a lot of players. So
that being said, though, like even though like the Genshin like the excuse is bullshit from the devs, I think like everyone can agree on that. I think Art was mostly asking about like even though the excuse is bullshit, the anxiety can still be there. Like, what about that, right?
Yeah, like what would our response be to players that genuinely do feel like, so for example, let's say someone joins right now. It's a good time to start playing Genshin. There's a 2nd anniversary. Sumeru is really cool. There's a lot of people to experience the game with. But they open up twitch.tv and they see the most popular stream, Zajef77, and they see his sign out. It does a 30k hyperbloom. What are they gonna do, right? Maybe they'll feel pressured to pull for constellations. And I think that's the kind of feeling that I wanted to address. I think that feeling is very real, because anecdotally, if you guys will indulge it for a little bit, for me, I watched like Sekapoko and Damon Kim when I first started playing the game, and they pulled for constellations on Klee, and their Klee was doing a ton of damage, and that is what like pushed me to want to learn how to do more damage, to push me to want to pull for constellations on Klee. And I own C1 Klee. And I think that this experience is not like unique to anyone that's like, I don't think anyone that falls for this is like stupid or anything and like dumb. I think there's a very real incentive for like content creators to use very powerful units in their videos. Like you could pull up Ziox's videos about Zhao, and his Zhao will do like 70k plunges. And some content creators are whales, right? Some content creators pull for really highly invested units, and they have like a ton of damage. I think this anxiety is real, but I don't think that this anxiety should prevent us from having challenging combat events. I think that the best response, I think, is just, I think it is a waste for these people, for people who have invested a lot of time in money into constellations, saving up for their favorite units, saving up for weapons, or you know, farming for artifacts. I don't think that you wishing for their, like, for them to not have anything to do with their time investment is a good thing. I think that's very cruel and very mean, and I've seen way too much of that on Twitter recently. But yeah, I think this anxiety is real. Like, I think it's silly that Mahoyaverse would use that as an excuse, because we have the constellation system, for Pete's sake, and they're not exactly like the most generous company when it comes to constellation, like giving away for units or anything like that. Like, we're in the 2nd anniversary. I don't think they've actually given us anything besides like 10 free pools.
I think about the whole like anxiety thing. People that like recognize themselves in that very often end up misunderstanding what combat players are asking for. Because yeah, harder things would be fun, but the problem right now isn't just that it's not harder things, it's just that it's not things. We don't have things. We want things, even if they're the same difficulty, just more things. And there's obviously always going to be that, like, if there's something that you can do to get rewards, there's always going to be that, like, desire to be able to do it. And I think that, yeah, there is some value in the idea that, like, putting more emphasis on the combat system could, like, exacerbate that anxiety. But, like, just watch the Zajef videos, I guess.
Well, I think one way to alleviate the anxiety thing with super hard content is just add alternate ways to gain the rewards. So if instead of completing Spiral Abyss, you know, floor 14, right? You could just be a teapot Andy and just, you know, make your teapot really nice, and you get the same reward that you would have gotten if you completed Spiral Abyss 14, and then you don't have to do that condition anymore. I think there are some games that do that really well. If I recall correctly, Guild Wars 2, you can get to the end game by just walking around and exploring the map, or you can PvP hardcore, or you can craft and do all kinds of things. So that'd be an excellent way of just adding content without making it more anxious for people who can't complete it.
I mean,
they can complete it in their own way.
One of the most unpopular events in Genshin of all time, the what's it called? The Vagabond Sword, the Legend of the Vagabond Sword. You didn't actually have to clear that with maximum fucking modifiers. You didn't need to clear it on the last day at all, actually, to get the max rewards.
You definitely don't.
But people still complained about it. Isn't that interesting?
I think that the biggest problem with that issue isn't that it was difficult, is that it was limiting.
It was
That
frustrating.
event wasn't like, hey, here's some hard content. That event was, hey, here's a modifier that makes most of your characters useless. There's a difference between combat that is difficult and combat that just tells you to go fuck yourself if you like a character. Or if you've built a team that doesn't actually happen to be the only fucking thing you can play. Oh, what's that? Your Ningguang is level 20 and you don't have Ganyu? Have fun beating this fucking flying Oceanid with infinite cooldowns, I guess.
I think one of the things about Vagabond was because it was so difficult and so frustrating that there was a huge emphasis on like problem solving in terms of like how to clear it. People leaned into co-op very well. Like I know I did. I know I fucking asked for help from Wales with like C6 Ganyus to come in and fucking one-shot my fucking Kenkis for me. I enjoy, like, I think having these difficult events, as anxious as they are, does like inspire some of the best moments in terms of like Genshin like community building. Like learning how to counter Magu Kenkis, like even outside the Vagabond Sword. I don't know if you guys remember this, but a long time ago there used to be an Abyss floor that had like a totem in the middle and like a fuck ton of archers, and one of the best counters for it was using the Geo main character to block damage to it.
Oh yeah, that one.
Or for 11-3, I remember there was a strategy that Zajef came up with was, okay, you just have to use a circlet that reduces the amount of time that this debuff is applied onto you.
Oh yeah.
And I think those moments, like when there is challenge, definitely does bring out like the most interesting parts of the game. But
yeah, I think when there are solutions to the problems other than just own the unit Lamau, it can be. But when the solution to the problem is literally just own the unit, that's frustrating. And I mean, obviously, however, so the gacha company, gacha companies want to make money by making you feel like you're like fucked if you don't have a given unit. But they don't have to. And like this,
okay, actually,
they don't
for
have
real,
to make every event like that. And when people ask for combat content, they're not asking for that. They're asking for, well, not that, actually.
I think that one of the biggest pieces of like that's just hypocritical of Hoyoverse is the floor 11 Abyss bonus. I don't think anyone's talked about this, but like whenever there's a unit that they want to like sell or promote, like that's going on banner, they throw an Abyss blessing that is like fucking jacked for whoever's on banner. I don't know if you guys remember like Kazuha, for example.
300%
Kazuha had like
swirl
a 300% multiplicative swirl bonus, and it's not like Kazuha was like the only abuser of it, but I think it was just kind of silly that like, yeah, you know, they kind of pressure you into, you know, pulling sometimes every now and then.
What a surprise! The current Abyss has 75% electro damage bonus.
Surely,
on floor 11.
Surely there's not an electro unit on banner right now.
Nope.
Surely.
Surely.
Okay. Any closing thoughts on this, guys? I've said my piece here.
I think I'm done.
Okay.
I think one thing that I think is interesting to think about is whether or not there's actually any uniquely induced anxiety as a part of combat events. I'm not sure where I fall on this, but I think that a valid argument would just be combat events do induce some form of anxiety, sure, but you already have that anxiety induced when you go on TikTok and you see like one shot big damage number showcases, or when you see the Spiral Abyss and you realize you can't clear it because you're a new player or whatever.
Yeah, ironically, that type of content is super popular.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know if there's actually anything unique that these combat events actually do to increase anxiety when it already exists, because one of the most popular forms of content is just whale showcases, like Toady Toe, I Win to Lose. Like these are super popular content creators. So I don't know if like combat events actually do anything to increase anxiety.
Okay.
Maybe
KB,
it's
do you
like
have any
slightly, but I don't
final thoughts here, Zajef?
I just
I'm
want more
looking forward
diversity in what to do.
I'm looking
That's all.
forward to the rerun of the Hypostasis Symphony event. I will most definitely be doing that shit in co-op.
Yeah, that's fun.
I'm gonna figure out what the best team against the cryo hypostasis is gonna be. Anyway,
Okay, and then
I'm getting my C6 Bennett and Jean to get the self swirl to get VV onto the cryo hypostasis ready. I'm ready, man.
the last thing I'll say is not like a question to you. It's just another catch-all, because I know that this podcast tends to, I don't know, spark debate among people. One of the things that we've mentioned is hypocrisy about like limited time events. I know that in another interview, I think with IGN, or maybe it was in the same one with it was the same interview on GameSpot. They are planning on bringing back limited time events, learning how to rerun them and stuff like that. So criticisms like, okay, Albedo's best in slot sword is literally unobtainable forever right now. And that doesn't feel great. And hopefully they'll address it. So good on them. And then I think the only thing we didn't touch on was, I think this is a minor point, but we can save it for another time, that Hoyoverse doesn't plan to change characters like at all in the future. And they don't plan on increasing resin. That was also in the interview. But yeah, I think that will be all for us, unless you guys have anything else to say.
Oh, we can plug the other podcast, the pre-release one.
Sure. I'll start with the closing things. I'm Artesians, and thank you for listening to the Theorycrafting Roundtable. If you like this content, and I know that a lot of you guys send me DMs and stuff like that, please keep sending more DMs and messages on Twitter. Tell us that you want this. Otherwise, it takes us forever to plan these things, and it takes a lot of work behind the scenes to get everyone to be able to show up. And sometimes things happen, like Tenten today, unfortunately, was not able to make it.
Yeah,
But
the main reason why we can't organize podcasts is because Tenten and my schedule never align. But when we do decide on a time, Tenten is never there anyways. So.
But yes, I'm Artesians, or I have been Artesians, and I am the head of Theorycrafting at Kitching Mains. You can check out our resources on kitchingmains.com. You can watch us more here on twitch.tv/kitchingmains. We also have a YouTube channel, our Twitter, all that good stuff. You can find us on Google. We have like the biggest, I guess, Genshin podcast, and we still have the biggest Genshin set of resources online in terms of a website. Yeah, and today it's been a pleasure. Was joined by Ayzel, a member of our Theorycrafting staff in Kitching Mains, and a fellow admin that helps us run it. Ayzel, do you have anything else to say or plug?
Yeah, I guess last week I was on, it's like a week and a half now. I was on Resin Refresh, which is a podcast by Travis Gafford and Mark Zimmerman. So go check that out if you haven't seen that.
I still need to DM Mark about that as well for me to go on. I think he's done with Worlds now. I saw a tweet earlier that he's finished with casting after the EG game. So, but he's in New York, so I'll reach out and see if I can get on there as well. And I was also joined today by KB Fun. Many of you guys might know him, maybe you guys don't. He is the head of Theorycrafting at Wangxing Funeral Parlor. Yeah, KB, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, we have the Doom Post podcast is what we call it, and episode 1 is out on our YouTube channel. I can post it in the chat, but basically we plan on having something similar to the roundtable every 1 week before a patch drops, where we talk about like the characters that are going to come out. And mainly our podcast is going to be around an hour or so, where we talk about the character specifically and really dive into that, rather than being a broad podcast.
Okay. And then I was also joined by Theorycrafter extraordinaire, Zajef77. Do you have anything else to shout out today? Yeah, I know you have a couple new videos on the way and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got my Nilo pre-release that I released today. I've got an Albedo AMA that I'm releasing eventually. I've got a Sino post-release that I'm releasing eventually, and I've got a Nahida pre-release that I'm releasing eventually. They're all recorded, just gonna be waiting on editors because I'm overworking the hell out of them.
And then
But yeah, you can check me out on YouTube if you're looking forward towards any of those. If you're not, well, you can check me out on YouTube anyways, or you can check me out on Twitch. And yeah, so just Zajef77 on both platforms. And
you
on
also
Twitter,
have a TikTok.
actually.
You have a TikTok now.
Oh yeah, I have a TikTok. I forgot. I have a TikTok now. And I have a shorts channel called Zajorts77.
Such a funny channel name. Zajorts.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
So I think next time on our podcast, if we can actually schedule it next week, we should talk about Sino, Candace, and all the good units that have come out. Tignati, Kale, Dory, all of them. But thank you guys. I'll catch you guys all another time.
Right. See you.
See you
And
guys later.
then for people that are listening, if you ever want to ask us questions, we do run a question segment right after. So catch us
I'm
next
not
time
doing it
live.
today, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I have to leave as well.
Yeah, I gotta people
No,
run. See ya.
That's perfect. Bye, guys.